The field isn't empty. I need to say that again, because the entire logic of why I drove 4 hours yesterday and stayed in a town I'd never been to overnight, the thing that made the demolished site on Grayling's National Waste Register so anomalous, the thing I've been sitting with since F put that sheet of paper on the table and wouldn't touch it again, was that there was nothing here. That's what the records say. Local planning authority, site assessment, a council surveyor sign-off with photographs attached, dated, stamped, unambiguous. The photographs show flat ground, some cleared rubble at the margins, a perimeter fence with a padlocked gate, and beyond the fence, nothing. The site has been demolished. The site has been cleared. The site, officially, does not operate. I am standing at the perimeter fence right now. It is 7:14 in the morning. I've been here for 6 minutes. And the field is not empty. There is a structure here. Low, 2 stories at most, probably closer to 1.5. Prefabricated construction, the modular kind you'd use for a temporary facility, except it isn't temporary. I can see the difference from here. Temporary buildings sit on the surface. This one has drainage runs built into the approach ground. Cable conduits run along the exterior wall, bolted directly into the panel joints, painted the same gray as the panels themselves. Someone spent money making those conduits hard to notice. Someone thought about how this building looks from the perimeter fence. I want to say something about the quality of the deception here, because I think it matters to the kind of organization behind it. This building is not hidden. It's not buried underground or screened by landscaping or positioned at the back of the plot behind other structures. It sits in the center of the field, in plain view of anyone on the footpath. What makes it invisible, what made it invisible on the council's own surveyor photographs, is paperwork, a signed assessment, a demolition certificate, a planning record that says, nothing is here. So when someone looks at the field, they're not looking at what's in it. They're looking at what the record tells them is in it, which is nothing. The building is hiding behind a document. That's a very specific kind of concealment, the kind that assumes the people who might look are the kind of people who read records first and look at fields second, which is most official people, which is most of the time. On the roof, and I want to be precise about this because I think it's significant, there is a ventilation unit, large, industrial grade, running. I can hear it from here, a low mechanical hum that sits just underneath the ambient sound of the field, the kind of unit you'd specify for a facility with high heat output, or a requirement for specific air filtration. A building this size, in an open field, doesn't need a unit that size for storage. It doesn't need a unit that size for an office. The unit is not here for the building's comfort. The unit is here for what's inside. Cooling demand. The phrase from the Callaway Effluent Survey. Organic load. Cooling demand. Continuous industrial process operation. The same survey language is standing 50 meters in front of me in a field that officially ceased to exist 14 months ago. There is a camera on a pole at the perimeter fence. Steel pole, fresh paint, the kind of camera housing used for outdoor installation in environments that need weatherproof equipment. It is not the camera you'd put up to deter opportunistic trespassers from an empty field. It is the camera you'd put up to monitor a site you consider worth protecting. It has been pointed at me since I stepped out of the car. I have been here for 8 minutes. I have not moved closer to the fence. I have been standing on the public footpath that runs adjacent to this land, because I want to be clear that I have done nothing that gives anyone a legal reason to approach me, and for 8 minutes, the camera has tracked me. Not the gate, not the approach road, not the building. Me, a specific person on a public footpath with a camera and a notepad. Which means whoever is watching the feed from that camera, wherever the feed goes, whoever receives it, knows there is someone here, knows what I look like, may know who I am, may have known who I was before the car door closed. I'm going to keep talking. That's the job. You're listening to Cold Frequency, the case of Elara Voss, Day 32. If you're joining this investigation for the first time, I want to give you enough context to understand why I'm standing in a field at 7 in the morning, being watched by a camera on a pole. And if you've been here since the beginning, stay with me. Because I think saying it all out loud, in sequence, at this point in the investigation, is useful. Useful for me as much as for you. The act of narrating a thing clearly is one of the only reliable ways I know to identify what you actually understand versus what you've just gotten used to carrying. Elara Voss disappeared 32 days ago. She was a journalist, investigative by nature and by training, the kind of person who follows a discrepancy past the point where most people would decide it's not their problem. She had been investigating a planning discrepancy, a site called Callaway Industrial Estate, listed in local authority records as decommissioned and non-operational, discovered by Elara to be active and operating under a government classification called Schedule 7, a designation that exempts materials and activities from public disclosure requirements. A designation that exists, as far as I've been able to establish, specifically for things the government has decided the public should not be permitted to scrutinize. The last footage of Elara Voss shows her walking toward Callaway at 2:47 in the morning. 43 seconds. Purposefully, like someone who knew exactly where she was going. And then the footage ends, and the cameras that would have captured what came next were, I was told by the detective assigned to her case, unavailable. Not missing, not corrupted, unavailable. I have been investigating what she was walking toward ever since. 4 weeks of investigation produced a name: Grayling Clinical Solutions, a medical waste logistics company. 9 years of operation, contracts with NHS trusts, private hospital groups, and what their filings describe as research partner sites. The kind of company whose business description is technically accurate and tells you nothing. Grayling holds a national waste carrier's license. That license requires them to register every site they operate at. It is a public register. Nobody reads it. A source who is helping me, who cannot be named, who has now stepped back from the investigation for reasons I understand and respect, read it. 6 sites. All of them listed in their local planning records as decommissioned, disused, or demolished. All of them, according to Grayling's own waste carrier registration, actively operational. The demolished one is the field I'm standing in front of right now, with a building on it, and a camera, and a ventilation unit running at 7:15 on a Tuesday morning. The detective who was helping me navigate this investigation was removed from Elara's case 3 weeks ago. The file was reassigned to a unit the detective's own superintendent described as not held at this level. I've thought about that phrase many times since. Not held at this level. The level of a 16-year detective. The level of a superintendent. The information about where Elara Voss's case file went is not available to the people who are supposed to be looking for her. The detective said, before going silent, "Don't call this number again." And I didn't, because the detective had given me everything they could, at real cost to themselves, and I was not going to be the thing that cost them more. The case stays open. I am the case now. Which is how I ended up driving 4 hours yesterday, staying overnight in a town I'm not going to name, and arriving at a footpath next to a field at 7 in the morning with a camera between me and a building that doesn't officially exist. The camera is still tracking. I'm still talking. Before I tell you what I can see from this perimeter, I want to tell you about M, because M is the reason I chose this site first from the 6 on Grayling's register, and because her story is the part of this investigation that has been hardest to hold with the professional distance the work requires. The distance that means you report what you find, and you don't let what you want to find become the same thing as what you're looking for. I've been working to maintain that distance with M since she first contacted me, and I want to be honest that it has required more conscious effort than anything else in this investigation. M contacted me 8 days ago. Her brother, she's asked me to call him R, disappeared 11 months ago. He was a runner, serious about it. Not the kind of running most people do for a few months and quietly stop. He'd run the same route every Sunday morning for 3 years. Same time, same distance. M told me he ran the Sunday after a minor knee injury a physiotherapist had told him to rest. She said, that's how he was about things he'd committed to. He did them past the point where stopping would have been reasonable. That detail tells you something about the kind of person R was. The kind of person who notices a planning discrepancy and doesn't put it down. 11 months ago, he went out for his Sunday run and didn't come back. His phone was found 4 days later in a ditch 4 miles from his house. No physical damage. Battery completely drained. His running shoes were found separately, 9 miles from his house, in a field. No explanation was ever established for how they got there. 9 miles from where he started. No trace of R. The police concluded a likely accident. The river that runs through the area has taken people before. It has the specific character of a stretch of water that looks safe and isn't, the kind of thing locals know and visitors sometimes don't. They looked. They found the shoes and the phone. They didn't find R. The file eventually reached a kind of quiet conclusion that M was never formally told but clearly understood. He probably went into the river. They probably won't find him. They'll let her know if anything changes. She told me she had been listening to this broadcast since the 4th episode. She said, "The way you described Elara walking toward Callaway, that 43-second clip, the way she moved, like someone who knew exactly where she was going." She said she thought about R when she heard that, because R wasn't just a runner who went missing on his usual route. In the 2 weeks before he disappeared, he had been asking about a planning application. A planning application for an access road, submitted on behalf of an entity M couldn't identify from the reference number on the application itself. Rejected. But the thing that made R notice it, the thing he'd mentioned to M twice in those 2 weeks, each time more specifically, was that the application referenced a site he could see from his running route. A site that was, according to its own planning record, demolished. The site is 11 miles from where I'm standing. R found this field 11 months ago. He found it and he started asking questions about it. And then he went for a run and didn't come back, and his shoes were found 9 miles from his house in a field, and the police concluded he probably went into the river. M said, he didn't fall in a river. She didn't say it like a hypothesis or a suspicion. She said it like a woman who has had 11 months to sit with what she knows about her brother, and what she knows about rivers, and what she knows about the difference between someone who goes into a river and someone who doesn't come home for a completely different reason. She said, "I just need you to find out what he found. M, I'm here." 22 minutes at the perimeter now. I've moved twice along the fence line, staying on the footpath, keeping to the right side of the boundary that gives me legal standing to be here. Both times the camera has moved with me. It doesn't snap or jolt. It tracks, smoothly, the way a well-maintained pan-tilt unit tracks. Someone has spent money on this installation. Someone maintains it regularly. Let me describe what I can see, because I think the details matter, and I want them on record while I'm standing in front of them and can be precise. Journalism, when it's working properly, is the act of describing what's actually there rather than what you expected to find. I didn't expect to find anything here. I came because F's list said this site was demolished, and demolished was the most anomalous word on a list of already anomalous words, and the most anomalous thing is usually the right thing to look at. The building sits roughly in the center of the plot. The land around it has been cleared and leveled, but not laid to any surface. It's compacted ground, some residual vegetation at the margins, the kind of gray-brown scrub you get on land that was cleared and then left to settle. There are tire tracks visible in the earth between the gate and the building's main entrance. The tracks are recent. The ground is soft from rain 2 days ago, and the impressions are sharp-edged. Whatever made them came through after the rain. There are 2 sets of tracks, I think. 2 separate approaches, both heading to the same point near the building's south entrance. This site has had multiple vehicle visits within the last 48 hours. A site that doesn't exist. Receiving vehicles. More than once, within the last 48 hours. The perimeter fence is worth describing separately, because I think it tells you something about how long this site has been operating in its current form. The fence is steel palisade, the kind used for permanent industrial security, not the temporary hoarding you'd use to secure a construction site or a decommissioned property while you decide what to do with it. The posts are set in concrete. The concrete is weathered. This fence has been here for years. The council photographs showing an empty field after demolition were taken, if their date stamps are accurate, 14 months ago. This fence is older than 14 months, which means either the photographs were taken before the fence was erected, possible if the site was genuinely cleared first and then rebuilt, or the photographs are not what they appear to be. I don't know which of those is worse. The south face of the building, visible from the far end of the footpath where the fence turns a corner, has two features worth noting. First, two small windows, high up on the wall, frosted. Not ornamental obscuring, the kind of frosting used specifically to prevent any view of the interior while still allowing light transmission. The kind you'd specify if the interior contains something you did not want visible from outside, even at height. Second, a door. Steel, double, no visible external handle. To the right of the door, at approximately shoulder height, a keypad. Gray plastic housing, flush mounted, recently installed. I can see where the panel was cut to receive it. Whatever system that keypad connects to, it was added to this door after the building was constructed. An upgrade. A change of protocol at some point in the building's operational history. A door that only opens from the inside, or with a code. There is no way into this building from the outside without either the code or an invitation. The ventilation unit. I keep coming back to it because I think it's the detail that tells you the most about what happens inside. The unit is mounted centrally on the roof. It is, I'm estimating from here, which means there's a margin of error, but I'm reasonably confident in the estimate. It's 3 or 4 times the capacity you'd need for a building this size running standard operations. Standard operations meaning offices, light industrial, storage, any of the things a building like this might officially be doing if it were officially doing anything. You put a unit that size on a building this size because the process inside generates heat, or because the process inside requires specific atmospheric conditions, temperature, humidity, particulate filtration, that can't be maintained without active air management. Cooling demand. The phrase sits in every Grayling document I've seen. It appeared in the Callaway Effluent Survey. It appeared in the effluent permit applications for 2 of the other sites on F's map. And here, 50 meters away, visible proof of it. A ventilation unit running on a quiet Tuesday morning in a field that doesn't officially contain a building at all. I have been photographing since I arrived. The camera position, the building dimensions as best I can estimate, the ventilation unit, the tire tracks, the keypad, the conduit runs along the exterior. I have enough to build a picture. I do not have enough to see inside. And whatever is inside, whatever justifies this building, this camera, this ventilation unit, this site that exists on Grayling's National Register, but not on any council map, is the question that has been sitting at the center of this investigation since the first night Elara Voss walked toward Callaway in the dark. I am closer than I've ever been to it, and the camera is still watching me. I had been at the perimeter for just under 3 hours. I'd walked the full length of the footpath twice more. I'd taken 3 sets of photographs from different angles, documented everything I could see without crossing the boundary. I'd sat in my car for 40 minutes writing up my notes while the camera watched me through the windscreen. My phone rang at 9:43. The name on the screen was one I hadn't seen in 12 days. N. The driver who worked for a Grayling subcontractor 2 years ago, who messaged me about a handoff at a lay-by, something under a sheet checked against a manifest in the dark, who answered my follow-up question about which hospital the collections came from with silence for nearly 2 weeks. I answered. He said, "I've been thinking about whether to call since I sent you that first message. I know you sent a follow-up. I've been sitting on it. I decided this morning that I had to answer it, because I've been watching what you're doing with this case, and I think you're going to find something, and I think you should know what I know before you do, because I think what I know changes the shape of what you're going to find." I said, "Tell me." He said the hospital was St. Agatha's, large NHS trust, serves 3 counties. He said he collected from their loading bay on the northeast side of the main campus, the section of the site that handles clinical waste and pathology transfers. He said the procedure was always the same. Late at night, paperwork pre-completed. A loading bay operative who signed off without making eye contact, the way people sign off on things they've been told not to ask about. A sealed container. One collection, maybe two, per month. Always grayling. Always the same lay-by on the same B road. Always a specific vehicle. He said he'd always assumed it was standard. He'd asked a colleague once, early in the job, what pathology transfers were. The colleague said, "Just tissue, samples, biopsies, the kind of material that moves between hospitals and research labs all the time. It's completely routine." He said he accepted that. He said he drove for a year accepting that, because it was probably true. Because most of the time, clinical waste haulage is exactly as boring as it sounds. He said, "But the night at the lay-by was not boring, and I've been carrying it for 2 years, and I'd rather tell you and be wrong than stay quiet and be right." He said he looked up St. Agatha's after he messaged me. Not the hospital. He knew the hospital. He'd been collecting from it for a year. He looked up the specific partnership agreements the trust had registered with external organizations. It's public information if you know where to find it, and he'd had 12 days to find it. St. Agatha's has a research partnership agreement with a private medical research facility. The agreement is listed on the trust's published register of interests, described as a research funding arrangement, audited annually. Nothing on the surface that would make a compliance officer look twice. The research facility's registered address is a management company in Edinburgh. He said, "The management company in Edinburgh has one director, and that director's name appears, as a director, on the filing history of Grayling Clinical Solutions. The same person." I want to be precise about what that means and what it doesn't mean, because I have spent 5 weeks learning to be careful with exactly this kind of finding, the kind that looks like a revelation and might be, or might be coincidence, or might be a connection that's real but innocent. A person can be a director of a waste company and a director of a research facilities management company, and both roles can be entirely unrelated to each other. Companies share directors. It happens constantly. It means nothing on its own. What it means alongside everything else is different. St. Agatha's Hospital. Pathology transfers. A loading bay operative who doesn't make eye contact. A sealed container, once or twice a month, handed to a Grayling vehicle at a lay-by on a B road in the dark. And the same person running the research partnership that generates the transfers and the waste company that collects them. A loop. A closed loop. Material leaving a hospital under a research partnership agreement, collected by a waste company run by the same director who set up the partnership. Material going somewhere in the Grayling network, to one of the 6 sites, to a building behind a fence in a field that the paperwork says doesn't exist. What is being transferred? That's the question I can't yet answer. Pathology material is a category, not a content. It covers tissue samples, biopsies, cellular material, fluid specimens. It covers a range that runs from entirely routine to things I don't yet have the vocabulary to name without accusing someone of something I can't yet prove. What she is now part of. The phrase has been in my head since the first anonymous call, 6 weeks ago. The question that was handed to me like a key with no indication of which lock it opened. What is Elara now part of? Not was. Is. Anne said, "I'm telling you this because you're going to find it anyway, and I'd rather you find it with context than without." He said, "I've told you everything I know. Please don't contact this number again." He hung up. I sat in the car for a long time after that. The camera on the pole watched me the whole time. I think that's fine. I think being seen is the price of this work, and I'm not going to stop doing the work because the work makes me visible. At 11:15, something happened that I want to describe as carefully as I can, because I think it means something specific, and I want you to understand exactly what I think it means before I tell you what I did in response to it. A car pulled up. Not gray. White. A fleet vehicle. I could identify it as fleet from the plates, the specific format of a vehicle registered to a company or organization rather than an individual. Clean. Well maintained. No branding anywhere on the exterior. The kind of white car that is white specifically because white is the most unremarkable color a vehicle can be, and unremarkable is a choice you make when you want something to pass unnoticed. It parked on the verge opposite the field entrance, roughly 50 meters from where my car was parked, close enough that the driver could see my car clearly, close enough that if I'd been standing at the fence line rather than sitting in my car, they could have seen me clearly too. A man got out. He didn't look at me. That's the first thing I noticed. He got out of the car, walked directly to the field gate, the padlocked gate, the only entry point in the perimeter fence, and he checked something on his phone. Then he looked up at the camera on the pole. Then he looked at the camera on the pole again, briefly, and he nodded very slightly. A functional nod, the kind that means confirmed, not the kind that means acknowledged. And then he got back in the car and drove away. He was there for under 2 minutes. He didn't look at me once, not when he got out, not when he walked past the front of my car at a distance of roughly 30 meters, not once during the entire time he was on that verge. He didn't look at me once. I want to be precise about the difference between this and what happened at Render Road, because the difference is what makes this so much harder to sit with. At Render Road, the gray car sat for 40 minutes. It wanted me to notice it. It was a message constructed specifically for the act of being received. Sit here, face this direction, make sure they understand they are being watched. That's surveillance with an intent that's legible, almost conversational, a version of, "We see you. We want you to know we see you. We are deciding what to do about that." There's something almost human about that, something that implies a relationship, however adversarial. The gray car was directed at me specifically. It required my attention to complete its function. This man didn't need my attention. He didn't need me to notice him. He came to perform a task that had nothing to do with whether I was watching. This was not that. This man came to check the camera feed. He checked his phone, probably confirming that my car registration, which has been in frame since I arrived, had been logged by whatever system that camera feeds into. He confirmed the camera was operational by looking at it directly. He nodded at it. He left. He didn't look at me because I wasn't relevant to the task he came to perform. The task was not about me. The task was about confirming that I had already been processed, already filed, already assigned a reference number in a system I have no access to and possibly no knowledge of the existence of. The gray car at Render Road was a warning. It had the character of a decision still being made, someone still deciding what to do about the person standing on the road, watching them, letting them know they were being watched. The white car was an administrative act, the act that happens after the decision has already been made and the relevant paperwork has been submitted. I am not being warned. I have been logged. I drove away from the field at midday. I want to be honest about why. Not because I was frightened, or not only because I was frightened. I left because I documented everything I could document from the perimeter, and because staying longer would have communicated to whoever monitors that feed that this field was the limit of what I had. It isn't the limit of what I have. I have 5 more sites. I left because I'm going to all of them. And because people who file paperwork confirming you've been logged don't usually expect you to keep going. They expect the logging to be enough. They expect the act of demonstrating that you're already in a system to function as its own deterrent. I am going to disappoint that expectation. I left to go to the next one. I called M from the road. 40 miles between me and the field before I pulled onto a verge and sat with the engine running and her number dialed. She answered on the second ring. She said, "Did you find the field?" I told her everything I'd seen. The building, the camera, the ventilation unit, the tire tracks and ground soft from recent rain, the white fleet car and what it did, N's call and St. Agatha's and the shared director. She didn't say anything for a while after I finished. I let the silence sit. I've learned in this investigation that silence after difficult information is often the most respectful response to it, and that filling it prematurely is usually about the person doing the filling rather than the person receiving the information. She said, "So R found the same thing?" I said, "I think R found this specific field. I think the planning application he was following was the access road reference for this site. I think he came to look, the way I did, from the footpath." She said, "They found his shoes 9 miles away." I know. 9 miles is approximately the distance between the field and the river where the police suggested R might have gone in. I had already calculated it that morning, sitting in the car with the camera on me. I hadn't told M I'd calculated it, because I didn't have anything useful to do with the calculation except make her feel worse. But she'd calculated it too. 11 months is a long time to calculate distances. She said, "He didn't fall in a river." I know. I told her, "I'm not going to tell you I know what happened to R. I don't. I'm not going to tell you this field is connected to his disappearance, because I can see the connection, and I can't yet prove it. And I've learned in this investigation that the distance between seeing a connection and proving one is exactly the space where I've most often made mistakes." What I told her was, "I heard you. I'm still here. And whatever R found when he stood at that fence 11 months ago, I'm going to find it too, slowly enough that what I find is useful." She said, "Okay." That was all she said. Okay. And I've been thinking about that word for 2 hours of driving since then, because I think it's the bravest possible response to someone telling you they're going to keep looking for the thing that took your brother. Not thank you, not please hurry, just, "Okay, I accept this. I'm trusting you with it. Okay. I'm going to be worthy of that." Here is where this stands. Day 32. Grayling Clinical Solutions holds an active waste carrier's license for 6 sites, all officially decommissioned or non-existent. I have now visited 2 of them. Callaway, blacked out windows, new surveillance, a gray car that wanted to be seen. The unnamed field, a building generating cooling load, a tracking camera, a white fleet car that came to confirm I'd been logged and left without looking at me once. St. Agatha's NHS Trust has a research partnership managed by the same director as Grayling Clinical Solutions. Pathology transfers from the hospital's clinical waste loading bay, moving through Grayling's collection network to facilities I haven't yet located. A driver who witnessed one such transfer had a lay-by in the dark, with something under a sheet being checked against a manifest. A man who found this field 11 months before I did, and whose shoes ended up 9 miles away in a different field, and who has never been found. I said in a previous broadcast that the pattern developing across this case has a name. I said I wasn't going to use it yet. I'm still not going to use it. Not because I'm uncertain about what it is. I'm becoming less uncertain about that with each site I visit. But because the moment I name it, the character of what I'm doing changes. It stops being an investigation and becomes an accusation. And accusations need to be made with evidence, not with suspicion, however well-founded the suspicion is. I have suspicion. I have a pattern. I have 2 sites, a hospital, a shared director, a driver's account, and a map with 4 more pins on it. I need what's inside those buildings. Point 6 is still safe, still being fed. I checked before I left this morning. A small mercy I've made a habit of confirming because small mercies matter when the larger picture is what it is. A cat in someone's care, alive and apparently annoyed about the standard of the food, which the person looking after her described as characteristic. That's Elara in that. I choose to believe that. This is cold frequency. The signal returns in 7 days. 6 sites. I've seen 2. 4 left. I'm going to all of them.